In this video, is what I want to cover is going to be the topic of culture, and of course that does get into a little bit of having a vision for your company and like where you're going. That kind of like lays the groundwork so that way that your team is on the same page as you. That's like incredibly important. Anytime I talk about something like culture and management style, the vision, that's all going to be like super unique to you. And so basically, I'm going to explain what has worked for me, because what I do in my company isn't going to work for everybody else, because it's going to be dependent on your management style and things like that. Because if you're needing a team that's going to be doing cold calling and stuff, that's going to be different than what I do. I don't do any kind of cold calling. I don't do any text messaging, stuff like that. I do direct mail. So all of what I need done in my real estate business is going to be data management, data storage, and data scrubbing. And then it's going to require data analysts to like price our mail for us when we give people offers, stuff like that. So make sure that you take this with like a grain of salt. So that way you're not thinking I'm telling you exactly how to do this, because it's like it doesn't work that way. You could have 50 different types of companies and the culture is going to be different at all 50 of those. So make sure that when I'm talking about this, you're kind of thinking about what you would change for yourself. And so this is going to be all for, real estate investors. So that could be house flippers, house wholesalers, land flippers. That's usually who the audience is that I'm targeting. I would say my company culture is going to be one that encourages hard work, and that's because I usually run a lean and mean team. There's not very many. So it's going to be me and my wife. We work in the office. I have 4 virtual assistants currently within the data department. And so it's not like a corporate setting. So like, let's say, for instance, if you have 100 people, and then you've got all these people in upper management, and then you've got more mid-level managers, and then they're managing small teams. Well, you can have a lot of inefficiencies and stuff like that if you do have some hard workers in there. But when you run a small team, every flaw is magnified because there's so few people. It's like, so you want to keep in mind when you're small, I prefer to have our company culture lean towards being, hardworking. Everyone is there for one another, and there's no criticism. And I actually invite my team to give me criticism, and it's like no repercussions, nothing. Like I encourage it, and I ask them for that routinely. When I give them something, it's like, yeah, sure, let me know. I'm open to it. And I think that's the way that everyone should lean towards that, because it invites them to be able to make more decisions and better decisions, because I don't want to be the guy there that they are relying on to catch every single thing. I want them to be able to catch problems themselves. So I think that is super important for me. So some of the other characteristics of our culture is going to be that, yes, we are there for one another and stuff like that. I want everyone to feel safe and be able to talk openly, and there not be like any kind of office politics and stuff. I want them to be able to have freedom. So that to me is a huge deal. And that's why I don't lean towards doing the micromanagement. I would rather avoid that, so that way they have more autonomy and more freedom. And so we're super results oriented. So basically that means as long as they give me the end result and it's what I asked for, I'll give feedback if it's subpar. If we needed to work on something, I'll just kind of let them know. And two, sometimes some of the things that we ask for is going to be super technical. So they have to tell me like limitations and things of that nature. But, it's like, yes, I'm always open to that. And mainly it's just results. So provided that, because they'll of course tell me how they arrived at solving the problems that way. They explain it in detail on our weekly calls when it has to do with data stuff. And if there needs to be something corrected, I can give them a day or two to go back and correct it, and then they'll bring it back to me finished. And that's really it. So like I guess On like my data analyst, for instance, I'm really not in there with them every single day unless they need me. There are times to where they're completely free to work for a few days or 4 or 5 days even before we really start talking. And that might be a simple meeting to where they just go over the work that they did for that week. Now, that's going to be different if they're settled in to like a task that they've been doing for a while. If it's a new task that they haven't done in a while, then obviously there's going to be more conversation and we're going to be going back and forth with chats. And then, I can also make videos for them. That kind of dips more into the training, but it does, kind of explain the culture of like what I want. And it's like, I just want to be there for them. And I don't really want to be super rigid on anything, because I think if I start being super rigid on stuff, that might stifle their innovation and trying to think outside the box to solve some of these problems. Every now and then they do solve problems in ways that I didn't expect. And it's like, I'm all for that, because I don't want to be the smartest person in the company. And so I actually like that when I'm trying to hire somebody, I actually want to find people who can solve problems much better than I can, and they can actually like see problems ahead of time, and then we work on those before we get right into it. I try to be there to guide them as much as possible, and on chats and stuff like that, training videos, I do try to make sure I'm explaining in really good detail. Keep this in mind. And I'm trying to explain what the end result would be just from some statements and stuff like that, and just kind of reminding them and then asking them, did you take this into account? And then we can kind of go back and forth. And that ensures that they knew about it while working on the project. Because some of the projects they work on could take a week or more, especially if they're creating stuff. It could be Excel spreadsheets or, like a KPI dashboard, things like that. And keep in mind, for you, I totally realize you may not be needing the same things I'm needing. However, I'm just trying to give you examples so you can kind of see where I'm at. And then maybe you can, transform that a little bit to what you're doing. So if it were to be something to where it were like cold calling and sales and stuff, those are like highly competitive environments a lot of the time. But for us, it's not that way. So I actually don't want competition in my data department, just because I would rather them be able to be there for each other, and they look at each other like they're going to help one another for the good of the company. And something else within my company that kind of goes back to the whole benefit thing, I don't ever want anybody to provide free work for the company. And in fact, when you're talking about remote, so virtual assistants, and basically what I teach is always going to be virtual assistants in other companies or countries. And so I want them to look at each other like they can help one another, plus they work the same shifts, because I'm going to be asleep when they're working. You could always reverse that, of course, and you could have them work the graveyard. Just depends on what country they work in, because South America time zone is going to be drastically different than the Middle East, Asia, stuff like that. The Philippines time difference from me is like 13 hours. So that's one reason that I want my culture to be more of like everyone is going to help one another for the good of the cause. And that is because they can help one another because they're awake at the same times while I'm asleep. So that works really great for me. Something else that I've done is I encourage them to, talk freely in their own chats, in their own language, because that way I don't have to worry about if there is a little bit of a language barrier between me and some of them. And so that helps a lot, because, so as you can imagine, if I'm up in the morning in the office and I'm having a team meeting, it's going to be super late for them. And sometimes I do try to offer them, a little bit earlier in my morning, so it's not quite so late for them. But either way, it's going to be early for me, late for them, and then vice versa. And sometimes I might be on there at 9 or 10 at night to do a quick meeting with somebody. But that way it gives them, more autonomy and freedom to kind of like do what they want. And as long as we're very results driven, that's what's most important to me. because I think that that is like something that's going to foster like innovation, creativity, things like that. I also, the whole thing going back to the freedom within our culture for them is going to be that, I want them to have a good work-life balance. I don't want them to have to, take a hit in their personal life to do this. Because basically, the people I have on my team currently, they were in the corporate world. And, it just is like soul-sucking work. Usually, always, it pays less than what you can pay them. I pay them more than what they were making. And it's not like a little bit more, it's a lot more, okay? Some of these people, when you start paying them, the same kind of rates like we talk about, I mean, sometimes they're making double what they were at their previous job. And it is still a very economical rate for you as well. It could still be in that $2 to $10 an hour range, but they're making way more. And that's something that gives them incentive. And instead of me doing a whole bunch of bonuses and stuff, now this can be totally against what you like, and I totally understand. I pay my team more per hour, so that way they always have access to that money on like every paycheck. Now you don't have to do that. You could always do the bonuses and stuff. But me personally, I did not like having to wait for bonuses. And then if anything goes wrong, then you don't get the bonus. I can't even tell you, like in the corporate world, this has happened to me personally. They would, if I made a mistake, they would then withhold the bonus. So you're like working for these bonuses that could be quarterly or yearly. And then you make a mistake and then that was discipline against you. And now you don't get the bonus. It has literally happened to me. And it's just like, it is what it is. So I'm like, nope, I don't want to do that. I want it to where, we've agreed on this hourly rate. It's way more than they were making. So in my opinion, it's like extraordinarily fair. And then now they're not always hoping for bonuses and things like that. They're always just getting their money. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, so it's like always having like a tight team. Anytime you are bringing on more people, like this is an example for me, it's always important that they get along. And also, it's my job when I'm making a hiring decision, I'm constantly asking myself, what will these people think of the new hire? Do I think that they're going to fit it all? And something that I've now started to do that I really like is, you can get referrals from your current team members. That's really awesome because in general, an A hang out with an A player. And two, if they recommend someone, they know that their name is attached to that person. And so they want to make a good decision so that it doesn't come back to haunt them because they don't want to look bad. And so that can be a really great thing when it comes to hiring. Plus, something now is ask our team members about them, or I can even have team members after I've done like an initial interview and I think they're a good fit, I can have my team members interview them as well just to check for a cultural fit because they can actually talk to them in their own language and they can kind of see and judge for themselves like, hey, do I like this person? Do I think that they can do the task? Stuff like that. And then I can make sure that they're going to get along. Steve Jobs talked about that a lot. And they used to have very long interview processes, and they would actually just bring the candidate into the company and then just let the meet with them. And then that person could then shadow the teams, and they would literally be able to get a feel for that person's character over the course of like hours. They might hang out there for a day and then just kind of see what it's like. I've heard other people there at Apple kind of talk about that too. Some of the rounds of interviews, how they last sometimes for hours. Now, I wouldn't get that extreme. Keep in mind, Apple, incredibly high pay, and two, the people were extremely technical on what they were doing. So it's a lot different when you're converting over to real estate, when it's probably going to be something like administrative tasks. So just like admin, data entry, stuff like that. Not nearly important for the like it would be if you're trying to hire a software developer, something like that. I would very much so make those kinds of test tasks and stuff before they actually are given the job. I would do a lot more in there than what we do for real estate. So think about now, if you kind of are thinking through like, okay, well, this is good culture. You've always got like the open and like honest communication, and it goes all the way to where everyone feels safe, they feel heard, they feel appreciated in their work and while they're at work. If you start thinking about some of the bad stuff, it's really just going to be like, okay, so they don't have freedom, they don't have any kind of autonomy, and basically all of the decision making has to go to the leader, and they can't make any decisions themselves, even though I'm sure that they would be more qualified to. So because like it doesn't matter like what we're talking about exactly, they probably have more skills than what we do as business owners in Excel and certain other things. There's no way that skills are going to surpass them on virtually any technical area, because they've already learned it and went through that in college, and then they had to use those skills every single day for potentially years, provided that you're hiring someone who has already had job experience, which is something that I would recommend as well. I usually do like someone to have job experience because this is going to sound a little bit messed up maybe, but when they've had that corporate experience and then they come over to someone like me, then they can realize, okay, I like this way more, and I feel like they appreciate it. Because if you take people who have never had a job ever and they think that these remote jobs, which are going to be work from home, choose the hours, the days, and it pays more and all these things, if that's someone's first ever experience, when they do encounter something negative or bad, they then think it's way bigger of a deal than it is, because they have no frame of reference. Like I've literally experienced the same thing when I had a job. I was able to get a job that is a lot of people's dream job when I went there, and I was only there for a couple years. But of course, like I'm a business owner, like I've never really wanted to go to work anywhere, but it was very strategic why I went to that place, and that was because I had an uncle that worked there as well. And so he recommended it, and so I was like, what the heck, I'll give it a try. And I'm super happy that that's the one I picked because of the size of that company and what I was able to learn while I was there. Because their culture was, it was like $8 to $9 billion a year, thousands of employees, quite a few locations. They were nationwide. They're actually one of the, well, I guess as far as food redistribution, they're the largest in the world that I know of. And I think it's like number 60 something on the that's privately owned. So I was able to see their SOPs and things like that. That was amazing. Another thing that was super cool was the culture there. So it was a super lonely job just because that's the nature of truck driving. That's what I did. And, it was something to where their culture, they only hired like less than 2% of applicants. I mean, it was probably like, I don't know, like maybe 1 point something percent of applicants. And so that's why it was a lot of people's dream job, because it paid more than a lot of places, but they required hard work and they required you to pay super close attention. They had incredibly high standards that they expected to be met at all times. And for a lot of people, it was worth it. They had a lot of the benefits that people wanted, which is going to be like the profit sharing and things like that and bonuses. However, when it comes to the culture, is what I thought was so cool about it, was that if you were at a place and you needed help, basically everyone that you talked to was like super on point with being a real person. Like they had a lot of integrity and character. I really can't remember running into people that I was like, I hate that person, they're a douchebag or whatever. Like it just didn't really happen. And that is simply because their process was to take you through like 3 separate interviews with different people conducting the interviews. One of them, I'm thinking they had 3 people in the room at once, and they was able to take turns asking me questions. But that was what they were screening for. It's like, hey, are you a real person? Do you have integrity? Or do you lie, cheat, and steal? Because you're not going to last there for any amount of time. I guarantee you that you're not even going to get through the front gates there at that place, just because they led with those kinds of company values of that. And so that's what I want in my company. If because I've actually had it to where on the interviews, I have encountered people lie literally the very first time we met for the first interview. And so it's like, okay, well, they're done. I just kind of get the interview over with and then that's it. But, I want people with higher integrity and that are real people that are open and honest, because that's the kind of stuff that can really harm a team, especially if given time, because it's like having a cancer in the team for me. And so that's why I don't want to deal with that. Okay, I would just say, I just try to keep an open mind at all times. I don't want to be closed off and stuff like that. And I make sure I don't ever want to cross the line with our culture, and I don't ever want to badmouth anybody. If someone's not a good fit, it's sure, you can definitely talk about the facts. I'm not scared to talk about the facts with somebody, but I just don't want to ever dip into that territory of now the culture is toxic to where people then feel like they can start talking bad about people. It's one thing to say, okay, that person is not a good fit and we got to get rid of them. But, it's I don't ever want to get in there and then I'm starting to act real unprofessional and then we're talking bad about somebody on the team behind their back, because it's what does that say about me? If I start doing stuff like that, then the team is going to say, man, does he talk about me behind my back? And it's I don't ever want to have to worry about that. Basically, I'm trying to always lead by example. Do I fail sometimes? Absolutely. Do I make mistakes? Of course. I can't even tell you how many mistakes I've made. It doesn't matter if we're talking about this year, the year before, it doesn't matter. I'm always making mistakes. And that's just because I'm doing a lot all the time, just like I'm sure you are as well. So I just want to lead from the heart more than anything. I want to always be logical, and I always want to favor towards being really fair. So one of the things, and I think I've already brought that up, there is a great book about Sam Walton, and it's the 10 rules of Sam Walton, something like that. You can get it on Amazon, eBay. I like that a lot, just simply because of back then when it wasn't so much a corporate company, Walmart that is, it's now transitioned to being just a huge corporate company that doesn't really do a lot for its employees compared to what it was like decades ago, how they had sharing. And when it was an especially small company, the culture there was hardworking. Everyone helps one another. It's very collaborative. They would, lean on one another to get things done. And it's that's what I want for our company, is doing things like that. So I think that it's always about trying to be fair with my team. I always ask them, it's hey, is this possible? Is this, because, I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. And sometimes I may even set them like that, and then I make sure that if it could turn into being unrealistic, I give them a heads up, hey, if this turns into being like that, just simply let me know. Because I don't want them, in the corporate world is what happens is you start having team members who are getting worried and things like that because they don't want to be open with you. And so they'll stop communicating with you, and you don't realize how far back the project is getting just because they're scared to go to their supervisor. And so I keep stuff like that in mind. Okay, I don't want that for my company. I want them to all be open and honest. Just come to me, tell me there's a problem, because just that alone could save me this huge ordeal of I thought something was getting done, but it turns out they got stuck, and then now they were too scared to come to me and tell me that they got stuck. This has literally happened to me on a small scale with things before. And as soon as someone stops communicating at all, and, then I'm already kind of suspicious, did something go wrong? Things like that. And two, when you first bring someone into your company, from my experience, they don't know you yet. So it's this weird dynamic of they don't necessarily know if they should be scared of you yet or not. And it's just anything in life. You want to get them in, and then you want to start treating them well from day one, because this is literally going to save you money. Because if you've got a bunch of people that's scared of you and stuff like that, it's going to cost you somewhere. I just can't tell you where it's going to cost you. But it has literally cost me money before of they don't want to tell me something because they don't know who I am as a person, and they're scared that they're going to get into trouble. And so that's why I always over communicate with them, lead with being nice and fair, so that way that they don't have a problem bringing something to my attention. So I definitely don't claim to be an expert on this. Totally feel free, figure out what words you want to associate with your company. Think about how you want your team members to feel. So I know that's going to sound weird. So my personality type, I'm an INTJ. I'm super logical. That's the same personality type as, some other famous people you can look up. But it is like, it's very hard for me sometimes to slow down and then try to think about things and use a lot of empathy in mind. Because sometimes I'll think, well, that's not a big deal or something. But then to somebody else who has a personality that is more on the touchy-feely side of things, to where they use more instead of logic, that's where I can get into trouble personally with communication. And so I'm always trying to slow down when it comes to management, leadership, the vision, the culture, stuff like that. Is I'm always wanting to slow myself down and think about it, and like, if I do this, how will they feel about it? And it has taken some work for me to do that, but it's like worth it. It's like something that I needed to learn and something that I needed to start doing. So basically, I'm always just trying to bring a human element to it, because anytime you're starting to talk about corporate stuff, business, profits, losses, it gets very inhuman virtually right then. Like, people don't associate corporations with touchy-feely taking care of individual people. That's just not the way it is. You think of, stockholders, owners, they got to make a profit and it's got to harm someone. That's literally where a lot of people's minds will go. And you've always got to bring it back down and make sure, because it's like, yes, the profit does be there. The company does have to do really good. But you need to, when you're thinking through these kinds of things, the profit is going to be there if the culture is what it needs to be healthy. And then now you've got all these people that feel taken care of. They're going to make money. It's like, if you think about all the companies that are incredibly profitable in the world, there's a lot of culture built into a lot of them. Of course, there's going to be bad ones. I mean, there's nothing anybody can do about that, but I'm just saying. So, and two, you got to remember that there can still be highly functional teams with great culture, even inside of a giant corporation. You hear about that all the time. It's like, this giant company is terrible, but then you've got these amazing leaders within there, and then they take really great care of their teams, and then they become highly profitable, highly functioning, efficient teams. So I encourage you to look at read some John Maxwell books. Virtually anything he's got is really great on communication, winning with people. That's one of his books, 16 Ways, I think, to Win with People. Some of the stuff over Sam Walton, and then some of the other famous people, they might talk about it, who's worked at Apple, stuff like that. Highly encourage it. If you got other questions, comments, definitely let me know. I'd love to answer some in some of the upcoming videos. And so this is for anybody who's basically like solo entrepreneur, and you're wanting to get to the point that you're wanting to have virtual assistants and stuff like that, to where it gives you back time. So you could either have it with family, or you get back more time to work on the harder issues to solve within your company. There's a video that's going to be in the description, and it's just a YouTube video, no opt-ins, no funny business. I recommend you go and watch it. It's like an hour long. It takes you from start to finish of, this is like how I'm going to find a virtual assistant. This is how I'm going to onboard them, the training. We talk about some leadership. We talk about the SOPs, how to train them, stuff like that. We'll talk a little bit about culture. And that video literally takes you step by step through it. I'm pretty proud of it. Let me know if I can make it better, but you really should go and watch it if you have any interest in this at all. It'll help to answer a ton of questions, so that way you're not just trying to skip from YouTube video to next YouTube video in order to try to figure this out. It'll like lay it out in detail of what it takes. So thank you. I look forward to the next video.